Welcome, everyone. We seem to be at the bottom of the hour here. Just give us a moment. Um, sorting out a slide problem here. TTL. Okay, there we go. We got our slides up on the screen there. So this is registration extension protocols extensions at IETF 119. Antoine, my co-chair, is here with us. He is remote. And just confirming, Antoine, you're ready to go?
I'm ready to go, Jim. It's a little bit early here, or in the middle of the night, but ready to go.
Okay. So I will pick up and work us through here. And then Antoine and I will share this as we normally do. And moving on to the next slide. Okay, so the usual note well. I'm sure that we've all seen this many times already if you've been here at the IETF. And of course, this is a standard statement. You do need to be concerned that any contributions and words that you speak here in the IETF are considered, part of the IETF process. And you should evaluate this on your own terms with your own legal advice as you see fit. Moving on to the next slide here, just a reminder, we focus on technical issues here, and it's important that we all do our best to keep our personalities out of what we do and how we contribute here. So this is hopefully just a reminder and not a statement that you need to attend to here. And then, of course, code of conduct guidelines continuing in all of that, right? It really is about just treating each other with respect and focusing on the engineering elements when you want to have something to say, something that you want to do. So please keep this in mind on the microphone as well as the mailing list. And with that, let's move on to our agenda here. Our agenda is pretty pro forma. These are the major sections. This is how we typically do things in this working group. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at the chair slides in detail. Any questions or agenda bashing here from anyone about anything? And I'm not seeing any hands anywhere. So we shall move on and assume that this is what we want. And we'll jump right into welcome and introductions, which we're kind of already doing. We will, as we have done in the past, we don't really seek to have a notes scribe per se, although we do welcome anyone who goes into Notepad and adds items to the agenda, which is usually preloaded there. What Antoine and I have done in the past is just grab the transcript and load that up as the minutes. And that seems to be working for the moment. We've already done the note well. And in document management, we're a pretty small group. We have a even smaller select group of people who tend to be very active and pay attention to most things going on here. So it's always a challenge for us to make sure that we have a document editor and a document shepherd And of course, it's often hard to make sure we get enough reviewers to pay attention to all the work. So just a reminder, please contribute where you can. And, even if that's just reviewing things, it's always good to acknowledge that you've reviewed something. We do look for +1s on the mailing list when it comes to last call and elements. And, although we're aware that can be hard to get, please do your part to acknowledge that you're there. Okay. Moving on, we'll quickly get to published documents here because sadly there are none yet. We have a number that are in the ISGQ, which are imminent and have been for a while. In fact, there are several that are in the RFC editor queue. So, we're in a pretty good place as far as that's concerned in terms of documents that we've gotten off our working group milestone list that are very close to being published. They're just working out some final details with the RFC editor. So the reverse search capabilities, a document title that I personally have never really liked, but it basically just adds a more full-featured searching method to RDAP, the federated OpenID proposal. This is just about getting authenticated queries in RDAP, being able to do that and support it. And then, of course, the redacted fields in RDAP. An important feature functionality that RDAP needs in order to support various privacy regulations around the world. So you just need an ability to be able to redact things as appropriate. So documents which have been submitted to the IESG, there's really only one. I'm going to take an extra minute here to talk about this document, the internationalized email addresses. And I'll apologize first in advance to my co-chair who is not fully up to speed on all this. Some things have happened while we've been here at this IETF meeting, and Antoine and I have not had a chance to connect. So this document has kind of been here. It is in the ISGQ. It has been in the ISGQ for quite some time. We've been in the background. There have been a few of us who've been going back and forth with the Art Directorate in terms of their evaluation of what this document means to email support and the email application service itself and the interactions that this particular extension has with that. There's also a recent issue that came up with questioning, and I'll admit that I'm the one who actually brought it up, kind of a late breaking, nominally technical question with the status of this document in particular with the broader EPP protocol. And that's because this document actually specifies changing a global setting in EPP. So therefore, it's now no longer all by itself an independent extension. It has impacts on other parts of EPP should you implement this. We believe we have an answer to all of that, and we can satisfy all of that. We kind of got that resolved. I won't spend time going through the technical details now, but if anyone is interested, please do reach out and ask. All of this will, come together and be seen by the working group before the ISG, our area directors, approve the document. So you'll get to see it. There'll be some changes to the document that have to happen. We don't believe, those of us who are actively trying to get this through and be responsive to the art director comments, don't believe that the changes we're going to propose are material. But of course, the working group will get its chance to say what it thinks. We will make all of that visible on the mailing list prior to giving the area directors an opportunity to respond and confirm that it meets their requirements in terms of the directorate comments that need to be addressed. And then hopefully, ideally, this document will go forward. So just a little bit of details in the background here that have to get resolved. And it's kind of unfortunate, but in this group, we have such a small group and such a small number of people who pay attention to some of the deep details here that, that's just, I don't know, we get stuck in this rut, stuck in this place every once in a while. But I think it'll be okay. The document's going to move forward. I think we're fine. At least my opinion about those of us in the background who've been paying attention to it. I think we've all come to an alignment And now we just need to see the actual text words and make sure that everyone likes them, and then we should be able to move forward. So no fundamental changes to what's there, just trying to make sure clarity is present. Let me just pause there for a moment, see if anyone wants to ask anything in particular right now. And otherwise, hopefully we'll have some time at the end too. We can dig in some more. So, oh, there's a question in the chat. Thank you for that. No, it's actually not about universal acceptance on the ICANN side. George Michelson asks in the chat, would he say that the interest for ICANN tech compliance because of universal acceptance? I mean, I imagine that they might have an interest, but the details of why this document is not moving forward is not because of that. It really is because of the interaction of this extension and what it does to email addresses and EPP and storage in a registration database, how that impacts mail services and SMTP services. And just trying to make sure that we've covered all sides of all of that. So thank you for the question. Okay, with that, let's move on again here. And now we'll talk about documents that are currently past working group last call. We have one document right now. We are waiting for a Shepherd write-up here on this document. I'm just calling that out and mentioning that there isn't really anything else to say there. I believe everything is satisfied. So as soon as we get that, we can submit that into the IESG, and that'll be yet another milestone off our list. And that's a good thing because we have plenty of new work to get into here and some existing documents that are currently on our agenda. So with that, we're going to move into talking about existing work, and I will now pause for one moment, make sure there's no hands come up in the queue. Nobody has anything up to this point. Okay, all of that's just administrative stuff, and I will hand this off to Antoine to take us through the existing work. Over to you.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Then I will put up Gavin's slides first, which is going to talk about this is DNS-TTL values. Let's see if I have the correct slides. Oh, I'm doing something wrong here. Oh, you have the slides, Jim. Can you put the slides up for Gavin?
Here we go. I think I have them. Oh, wait a minute. These are the slides. Okay, I'll work the slides.
Okay, thank you, Jim and Antoine. So hello, everyone. Good evening from the UK. Good morning to all of you. No coffee for me. I'm having tea. First thing I want to talk about during this meeting is the EPP extension for DNS-TTL records, and hopefully this will be a short talk. So if you could move on to the next slide, please. For those who aren't familiar with this extension, it allows an EPP client to specify TTL values for the DNS records that live above the zone cut. So that's NS records, DS records, DNAMEs if there are IDN variants that provision as aliases, and for name servers, the glue records A and quad A. It's been a working group document for just over a year and is slated for publication as an RFC in May. Next slide, please. So there has been a few iterations since we last spoke about this draft. The main one that's happened since Prague was a change to the way that the info command works. Previously, the way the info command worked was a client that sent an info command for an object. If it if it specified the extension in the login command, then the server would send back all of the TTL information. So it's quite noisy. and would send information back without the client specifically asking for it. And that's changed, so that the server now doesn't send anything back unless the info command has been extended with a TTL info element, and that has a policy attribute that can be used to make the response more verbose. So by default, it will just include TTL records for DNS types with non-default values. But if the policy attribute is true, then it includes TTL records for, or elements, I should say, for all DNS record types. And there's an area in that slide there, in that second bullet point. And it also includes the policy. So it includes for each record type the minimum, default, and maximum values for the TTL for that particular DNS record type. So that's obviously something that was suggested by Jim Gould on the mailing list. That was discussed there at the mailing list, and I have a version of the extension, the draft, ready to publish that will go as soon as I'm able to. And with that, if you can move on to the next slide, I pretty much feel that this document is done. So would like to give people opportunity to raise any comments if they have them now. Otherwise, I'll be asking for a last call fairly soon. And that's it.
Okay, thank you, Gavin. Any questions for Gavin? Seem to be missing my cue, but where is it? Yeah, there it is. Okay, if not, then thank you, Gavin.
Thank you.
And Jim, you can put up the slide for JSDIP, for GeoFeed.
Hello, I'm Jasdeep.
Hello, JSDIP. Slides getting up. And there you go. Go ahead.
So Antoine and I, we were negotiating the time. So we initially had 10 minutes, but now we have 6. So I'll move fast through it. So I think this is essentially update on the RDEP extension for GeoFeed data, what we have done since Prague. Next slide, please. So just to jog our memory, this is how it was earlier, where we had this GeoFeed 1 extension and a GeoFeed1 _ GeoFeed member. And it was essentially a string URI member. Next slide, please. But now, thanks to Gavin Brown's input at the last Prague, and I think we all concluded it was a great idea to introduce this semantic as a web link in RDAP. And so now the draft has been updated with a GeoFeed link member and a very slight change where the extension is now called GeoFeed1 instead of GeoFeed v1. And so here is essentially all the changes. As we all know about the web link structure, and the benefit of it is that for now it is in the CSV format, but in the future you may be able to define other formats. We introduce a new GeoFeed link member where the link context is obviously the IP network you're talking about, which is the value. As you can see in the example, the relation type is geo. This is a new relation type we're introducing. And relation type is essentially saying that when you go from the link context to the link target, you'll find a resource with geographic information. And as you notice, it's of the type geo, not GeoFeed. And if you study web linking RFC, essentially it recommends that pick your scope of your relation type to be not too specific, if that makes sense. So Tom and I, we stuck with this for now. So this will get registered. And then obviously the href is the link to the GeoFeed CSV file. It is supposed to be over HTTPS, and it's a CSV file with RPKI signature concept, which is sort of ensconced as a comment. And finally, the type of this, the media type, it's application/geofeed plus CSV. So this is new. And next slide, please. So I've already talked about the first 3 bullets here. The last bullet is interesting because now text CSV media type allows comments. In fact, it defines it. But Tom and I, we debated with some other folks also, and the conclusion was that although the CSV geofeed data could be directly viewed by a user, the most common use case will involve it being processed by some sort of application first. And that makes sense because you're looking at those geofeed data, which is generally in the form of prefix and then the geo information on each line, and then the RPKI signature. The idea is that since application is going to touch it, it makes sense to introduce a new media type under application top level. And for now, obviously, it is geofeed as a subtype, and CSV is the structured syntax suffix. And fortunately, we have Murray in the room, and I was seeing that he's one of the experts listed on the media type registry. So I think those are the salient changes we have. Good news about this, which I don't have on the slide. The RFC 9092 biz authors have now included this draft as a reference in their draft. And their draft, if I'm not mistaken, is now in the RFC queue. So that's a good news because we have socialized this with Randy Bush and others, Warren Kumari and others. So all in all, I think it's moving in the right direction. Next slide, please. These are just a couple of references to the RFC 9092 biz and our work. One last comment. James Gold gave some really good feedback today morning. So we will, and I think it makes a lot of sense, some of the points he's making there. So we'll reply to it in interest of time because I have 6 minutes on the list itself. So with that, I conclude the talk.
Okay, thank you, Jasdeep. You have some more time. Oh, sorry, my monitor is suddenly failing, but I'm back. Okay. Yes. So, any questions for Jasdeep? Because we have a few more minutes. I think Scott entered the queue. So Scott, go ahead.
Thank you, Antoine. Scott Hollenbeck. Jasdeep, I just took a quick look at the IANA considerations section of the draft. Suggestion, include the URL for the registries in which you are requesting the addition of new values. That'll just make IANA's job a little bit easier in the future. So if you're very specific about which registry you're requesting an addition to instead of just describing it as text.
Thank you. That's a great suggestion. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And then I have a question for you as well, Jasdeep. I think one of the remarks of James was also that you're focusing very much on registration of RER objects, so basically IP addresses, where the geofeed might also be, of interest to domain registries or perhaps enum registries or whatever other sorts of registry. I think that will be a very good suggestion. What are your thoughts about that? Do you need any help with that?
Right. That's a very interesting idea. And my preliminary thoughts, and Tom, please jump in if at some point you need to, is that geofeed has IP semantics, if you think about it, right, as I explained. So the safest bet was, hey, just go with the evolving the IP network object class, right? But as long as that those kind of objects can be included in other objects. We have an example of that, right? Where, for instance, for entities, when you have orgs, if I'm not mistaken, you can include IP objects. So yeah, we can give some more thought to it but the inherent semantics of geofeed is all, as I said, prefix, geofeed information, and then RPKI signature for it. It all smells networks. But to your point, it doesn't stop us, Antoine, from aggregating it in other object classes as long as they allow IP network object class, if I'm making sense.
My concern was more that, you're talking RPKI signatures, which is basically encryption for IP addresses mostly, right? And IP and RAR objects. Well, we don't have something similar, perhaps, in other DNS or and entities that you want to give a geofeed extension.
Right. So this is quite closely tied to RFC 909 2bis. So that's the point of it, because the idea initiated from those guys, because in absence of any, as I mentioned last time, structure, a purposed field or structure for this, they were like shove it into remarks. And so now we have this. So yeah, that's for now where our current thinking is, but we can certainly discuss this on the mailing list.
Yeah, so let's discuss this on the mailing list. Thank you very much. I see James Gould in the queue. He's next.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, I found the form of extension to be very interesting. And so this form of extension we may want to include in the RDAP extensions draft along with other forms. So as we go through that, something to consider. Thanks.
Yeah, James, that was a very insightful feedback along with a few others. Yes, I noticed that we have in the extensions draft, just 30 seconds, something called bear extensions, marker extensions, profile extensions, but you're spot on. It doesn't fit any of that. So maybe Andy, Tom and I will look at this, what kind of genre this fits into, but thank you for that insight.
Antoine, we don't hear you.
So, sorry. Thank you, Jasdeep. Not anybody left in the queue. So, Jim, if you can go back to the slide chairs, the chair slides. Sorry. And before we go back to the chair slide, we have Murray in the queue.
Just real
Murray,
quick
go ahead.
to close the loop on the EAI document, am I returning that to you?
No, that's not the expectation. The way I understood our discussion yesterday is it's in your queue and you have pending comments from the art directorate that the working group needs, the document author needs to be responsive to. Mm-hmm. And so that's what we're going to do is we will provide a revised document that is responsive to those comments, and then it will be up to you as to how you want to go forward.
Okay, I'll wait then. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. If you can go to this one. I think we forgot this one on the agenda, Jim. I thought you would do it. So we have another document in. Oh, go back to 5, Jim.
No, this is where we are, right?
Yeah, I think we forgot 5, didn't we?
No.
Okay, because I just wanted to say that for the RAR document, that's probably going to come back to the working group for another working group last call. That was confirmed to me by the authors, so I just wanted to mention that.
Okay, yeah, because what I said was we were waiting for the document Shepherd write-up. So you've been following that one. Okay, so
yes, exactly. That's why I wanted to make that comment, right? That the authors will produce another version of the document, and it will come back into the working group for another working group last call. And this is a reminder again to everybody that we should review documents before they go into working group last call, because when you want to make changes during working group last call, when you're going to review them in working group last call, we may need to take them back and do another working group last call, because we expect documents to be stable during the last call. Okay, then we go to item 7, and then I hand it over back to you, Jim.
Yes. So, so this is the next thing, RDAP versioning extensions discussion. We have noted this on the mailing list a few times. We unfortunately missed an opportunity to schedule an interim meeting. We had in Prague said that we would try to have an interim meeting in January to move this forward. We kind of missed the opportunity to make all of that happen. So, you know, we still need to make that happen and resolve what it is we want to do here. So the plan here at the moment is that we will schedule a meeting in April. We'll have an interim meeting. But we wanted to kick off the discussion here today and have some discussion about this. And really we have, you know, two questions in front of us. And I'm hoping that we can get some consensus on the answer to question 1 here today, or at least a guiding direction for what we're doing. And that is asking the question, what problem are we really trying to solve here? You know, and what contribution do each of these documents make? That's kind of getting into the technical details of the document. If we can come to some consensus here about what problem we're trying to solve with these 3 documents, and then we'll know what to focus on as we move into an interim meeting where we can focus on just having a detailed discussion, just having a technical discussion about how each of these documents do or don't solve that particular question. I think that this is really an open discussion opportunity. I'll sort of lay this out in you know, the way that it exists for me, okay, as something for us to talk about, looking at this slide here. If you have a copy of the chair slides, this particular slide is new. It was added just this morning to the chair slide deck. So if you're looking at the chair slide deck on your own local machine, you won't see this particular slide. But there is kind of a larger question here. And it's interesting, even as you're looking at the geo feed, you know, we were having a bit of discussion about, you know, what does the extension really look like? What does the RDAP extension look like? And, you know, JASDIP had made some changes based on some suggestions. And, you know, it really is just a bit concerning that we have these 3 documents which really do appear to be related in terms of discussing versioning and extension issues in RDAP, and they don't fully cross-reference each other, right? A couple of them do reference the other 2, but, you know, one of them doesn't in particular. So if we're going to have these 3 documents and they do sort of touch on the same kind of space, this versioning question in RDAP, this extensions question, the versioning of extensions, it just feels like these documents really do need to be very clear about how they relate to each other or not, and what is their individual role in the space. So that's really what motivates this idea that, you know, what is the problem we're trying to solve? Are we trying to solve a versioning problem in RDAP and or in RDAP extensions? And one of the documents in particular is intended to provide some guidance about RDAP extensions. And yet we have this media type extension document, which also sort of adds to all of that. Okay. So this is what's motivating, from a chair's point of view, the question about what are we doing here and what do we want to do with these 3 documents? Now, the working group has adopted these 3 documents, but we took them on with the premise that we haven't defined a milestone for these 3 documents. So that's the purpose of the discussion that we would have in the interim meeting. If we can get some guidance here, some consensus here on the problem we're trying to solve, then we will dig in during our interim meeting and actually confirm that, okay, we can solve this problem. These 3 documents are all informative to whichever problem we're trying to solve. Versioning and extensions, maybe 2 documents, it may be 1 document. We're not even presupposing any of that. It's just an observation that, you know, those 2 sets of issues are related across 3 documents. One thing do want to be careful about, though, is we only want 1 standard. So to the extent that these things are related and or overlap, we have to sort that out and break it down. because from a working group point of view, we should have one document which describes whatever problem we're trying to solve. And if there's any other alternate solutions to that problem, then those documents should be experimental. I'm not trying to block the publication of something that's interesting and useful, but let's make a decision about what we want from an interoperability point of view so that, we know that things are going to work going forward. And so that becomes an important part of how we evaluate these three documents towards whatever solution we decide, we're going to be seeking. So, question to the group, and we can have whatever discussion we want to have here. What problem are we trying to solve? What are we trying to get to, so that we can properly evaluate these documents and, as a group, come to some consensus. And I see Jim in the queue there, so that's perfect. Jim, please go ahead.
It's pretty clear to me that they're solving different problems, but hopefully I'll be able to communicate why I feel that way. The first, with the RDAP extensions, I view that as a broader problem. I see that as providing clarification, guidance related to the building of RDAP extensions, and it kind of correlates to the guidelines for EPP extensions in Scott's RC 3735. So, for example, the question I just asked about the geo extension, I believe that form of extension should be outlined and defined within the RDAP extensions draft. So I see it as being broader. As far as the versioning extension, that's focused strictly on versioning. We cover opaque versioning as well as semantic versioning and an extensible set of versioning that could be defined in the future. And pretty much one of the aspects of the versioning extension is the ability for the client to specify what they want to be included in the response. What we had in there were the use of query parameters, and it winds up that the media extension provides another form that could provide the client preference as well. So that's why we added a reference to that draft from the versioning draft. And I see the media type extension as more specialized and getting past the forwarder concern that's been brought up on the list. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Jim. That was very clear. Certainly that all resonated with me, but I am really looking for, again, working group consensus on that point. And I see Andy's got in the queue, and of course he is author on a couple of those documents too. So Andy, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I want to agree with what Jim just said. And I think I do believe all three of the drafts reference each other in some way. So they do all, each one of them is kind of solving a different aspect of some of the same problems. I don't think we help ourselves by trying to consolidate these drafts into one document either, because they all do break away a specific part of the problem and solve it, but they do interrelate when they do that. So I don't think we need to try to consolidate the documents at all. Yeah, that's really all I have to say.
Okay, so I think what I've heard here, at least from the two of you, is that it is appropriate to have all three of these documents existing, that they don't need to be brought together. It may be that I'm the only one who has questions about all of this. And if that's true, then, I'll just have to sort that out for myself. But I have to admit that, I really was kind of taken by these documents. I'm not seeing the clarity that the two of you represent in these three documents. And so maybe this is just a discussion about some editorial exercise to make it more clear what's going on. That's from my point of view. I really would appreciate some other words from others in the working group. I would appreciate some other voices, someone else to look at these three documents and, decide, make a decision, have an opinion about what you think about how they work together or not. And if all of this is clear. And now I see we've got a little bit more of a queue going here. So Antoine, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you know, I understand that both the authors, of course, are very clear about what they want. They're very into the material. They're very specialized. But I didn't hear anybody say yet what problem we're trying to solve. Yes, there are three distinct documents, but what is the problem that we're trying to solve? That I didn't hear that question answered yet. So that was just like you, Jim. I don't have it clear in my head yet. So that's just a remark for me. And then we go to the next one in the queue, James.
Yeah, let me just say, thank you, Antoine, for bringing us back to the starting point here. You're absolutely right. Jim Gould, go ahead, please.
Well, I was going to give the floor to Rick since he's at the mic. I can come after him.
Okay, go ahead, Rick.
Thanks, Rick Wilhelm, PIR. So I've spent some time with these three documents on the long flight from the States, and I actually have been following the versioning thing when we were bickering about it over the past 8 months or so, and I thought that these documents did kind of separate the concerns pretty helpfully, and I was glad to see the three documents emerge. I do think that we need more specification around RDAP extensions, because while I think that EPP extensions, the community has had a lot of experience with those over the years. I think that RDAP extensions are relatively untrod turf compared to EPP extensions, and I think that we are now, as RDAP is we're gaining more experience, operational experience with RDAP. We need to get good and fluid and simple, make RDAP extensions a simple thing for us to do. And a big part of that is making sure that this versioning stuff works cleanly. RDAP had I'll say an unfortunately long time between specification and wide deployment. And then now that it is in really wide deployment, the versioning thing, the extension thing is coming at us hard and fast, and getting this versioning stuff tight will benefit everybody. So I think that getting these documents and this specification clean would be helpful to implementers. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Jim, do you want to take the others to just get some other new voices in? Just let you be in the queue. You can go last. We've got Powell next, and then Scott. Or do you want to jump in here?
If I can jump in and just follow up on Rick, I'll be very quick.
Go ahead.
Pretty much the way I view it is that tweaks need to be made, but I believe on the RDAP extension to broaden it, and then have the versioning and the media X drafts be closer aligned, but they're just tweaks. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Powell?
Yes, so taking a look at these three documents. So the extensions document seems to address a specific problem what we had in the past of difficulties how to express extensions and the properties and the likes. And the other two documents, so versioning is also distinct and adding a version component, which was kind of missing so far in the RDAP. And the RDAP X has this overlap with versioning when it comes to requesting the client preferences. And I think this is the part of it where I would like to see some clarity from the discussion here, which way we go, because this is exactly the point where we have an overlap between the two documents.
Great, thank you, Powell. Appreciate that. Scott?
Scott Hollenbeck. I I have to echo some of what Rick said here. I think the biggest issue is that we do not have a 3735 corollary for RDAP. We don't have something that provides us with guidelines for how to extend RDAP. And that will lead to some discussion of the topics that are found in the other two drafts. So whether they ultimately merge into one document or if they stay separated as three, I am less concerned about. but I absolutely believe that we need something like 3735 for RDAP.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Scott. Antoine, please go ahead.
Yeah, Scott basically got the words out of my mind. I want to remind everybody that when we look in our charter, we have this registry of EPP extensions where, you know, the goal of our working group was to basically merge proprietary extensions into one common standard. That was basically the goal in our charter. When we did REGEXT and when we did EPP extensions, and we don't have that yet for RDAP, or at least it is not clearly specified that the goal of, you know, creating RDAP extensions is, you know, to create one standard extensions if we can. Instead of, you know, getting as many RDAP extensions as possible. And I think that the direction where we want to go is something we should really be carefully looking at, that should be a goal for RDAP as well.
Thank you, Antoine, very much. I agree. And next up, we have Jasdeep, please.
Hi, Jasdeep. So yeah, I agree with most of the comments made so far. Clearly, extensions draft is that's a pretty well-defined problem space, because as RDAP matures operationally, there have been questions and we end up wasting time sometimes. So I think that'll be a very useful contribution in terms of clarifying extensions, right? As for versioning and the MediaX type, yeah, it looks like they may have some sort of crossover, but I think James put it well, where versioning is the pain point. What it solved was, to start with, was structured versioning, and then taking it further to be able to exchange metadata about various types of versions. So I think that's a very useful axiomatic contribution. And the draft on MediaX, I think that also came out of that whole discussion. But the observation was that we were starting to introduce different ways of negotiating content, /extensions, and we can parse these words further. And there existed a good way to do it through HTTP already. And so I think that was the insight. It's a low-cost solution to negotiate content, as is generally done for any other HTTP application. So I think each of these have well-defined axioms, so to say, that I personally would be comfortable, as Andy said, to keep them separate, maybe clarify the problem statement some more. But that's my 2 cents.
Okay, thank you. That ends our queue. Let me try to express back what I believe I've heard and see if anyone wants to jump up and clarify that. So in terms of what problem are we trying to solve, I believe I heard several people speak to the fact that having clarity with respect to versioning and clarity with respect to extension guidelines would be a good thing. And it seems like probably those are 2 separate documents, but we don't have to make that decision today. At least those 2 questions appear to be agreement that we should make sure we have clarity on those points. I think it was Rick who first said that, you know, RDAP is now becoming widely operational. So, you know, these are issues which are now coming at us hard and fast, as we've seen, because there's already a number of opportunities to extend RDAP. So we should get some clarity on these points and do that. I haven't heard anyone suggest that either one of those documents is way out of line. So that's a good thing. So maybe if we have a meeting, an interim meeting, and we have a technical discussion, we can quickly look through and decide that there really are just some editorial updates, you know, maybe semi-material updates that we need to make to those documents, and we can get ourselves on a good footing with respect to that. So I think it would be good to have ourselves an opportunity to have a technical discussion on those two documents, and would really hope that several people would be able to come and attend, not just the document authors. I'll simply take as an action, both as chair and personally, to try to run a doodle poll here through the working group mailing list and see that we can find a time and get an hour and get most people to be there, or at least a good number of people. See if we can do that. I've not heard much discussion about the media type document, but certainly no one has objected to it. I'd like to keep it on the list too, so that we have an opportunity to have a discussion as part of the problem we're trying to solve. Yes, we need clarity about versioning and extensions. I'd like to have some clarity about the relationship of the media type document to these other two. So I want to make sure that we get that clarified. It can certainly continue to move forward. Only one person really seemed to indicate that they thought it was, I guess it was Jim Gould, commenting about how it's a very specialized case of extensions, and it can sit by itself. I'm okay with that if no one objects and we get consensus, but let's leave that as a question we can also hopefully resolve at our interim meeting. And now we've got a little bit of a queue. So that's my playback of what I thought I heard, and comments on that. So Antoine, please, you're up first.
Yeah, listening to people, there's one thing I still don't understand from my broad overview. I'm not an implementer, but negotiating media type, is that the question we have to ask ourselves, is that negotiation really needed in RDAP, or is it something that happens with RDAP data after you query it? That is something I still don't get from reading the draft. Whether or not that should be in RDAP or something that's after you get the data. So if somebody can make an explanation to that, doesn't need to be now, but during the discussion in the interim meeting, or perhaps on the mailing list, that's a concept I still don't get right.
Okay, yep, thank you for that question. Certainly a good one. If anyone would like to say something about that, that'd be great. But otherwise, let's keep it on the agenda for the discussion that we'll have at our interim meeting. And Andy, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to answer that question. The reason the media type came up was to deal with the fact that if you do support multiple versions of an extension, you need a way for the client to be able to signal which version they want, as opposed to just sending back everything. So that's kind of the point. And the other point of it is to not create multiple ways of doing that. Only one way of signaling from the client what they want the server to send. So that's the whole point of that. That's content negotiation.
So I guess,
so isn't that a versioning question then, instead of a content question?
Isn't that so all the information as an extension, when you have an RDAP extension, if you have multiple versions, you can be giving back multiple versions of that extension. So this is a way for the client to be able to say, I understand this version or this version or this version. That's the point of it. And it's not just a version of an extension, it's multiple extensions. So if you look at one of the examples that we had was with the different contact types. So if you had multiple contact types, so the client only understands one type, then the client can signal to the server which types it understands. So you're not sending back data in multiple formats. Does that make sense?
Yes, but then again, if I want to have a specific data format back, right, a specific media format, isn't that then a question of, okay, I want to get back version number 3, and that gives me back the exact media type that I want? Do I understand it wrongly there?
Currently there's only one media type. So no, the way it works is the media type has the new media X type has the extensions encoded in it. That's the whole point of the new media type.
Okay, I have to read the drafts again, because I still don't get it. If I'm a client and I want something back in a specific format and I signal that to the server, I would expect the server to know, okay, you want this format back, right?
How do you signal? How does the client tell the server that? That's the whole point of content negotiation.
I would expect that to be in the version that I understand, probably.
The version of the extension, yeah, which you specify in the media type.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to take the rest
Yeah.
of that discussion into our discussion. But I thank you for that, Andy. I don't claim that I've fully got it in my head, but I think you've clarified at least something for me. That the dots are coming together, as they say. So we'll see. We can have that discussion come April. All right. So at least having a good technical discussion about these documents appears to be a good thing. And I'm not seeing any objections. No one is saying no, jumping up and down or anything like that. So we'll try to schedule something. Certainly we'll make sure that Jim and Andy and the other authors are present. And hopefully we'll get a few of us, a few others from the working group who have an interest to be there so we can talk through, make sure that we all have a clear understanding of the role of each of these documents. And then we can also set up a milestone date for them as part of our working group administration, and then we'll move forward from there. Okay. Any objections to that? I think, Andy, that's an old hand. I'm going to go with that. All right. With that, then we now move to new work with presentations. And once again, hand this back to Antoine. And here we are. And let me get a presentation up for you. But over to you,
Yeah,
Antoine.
and like I said, Gavin was a bit late with his slides for this one because he forgot that he was on the agenda first. So I'm trying to refresh the documents in the Meet Echo that I just uploaded. But I don't see them in there. Can you do it from your...
Yeah, I now realize that Gavin had more than one slide deck, so even I got
Yes,
confused.
that's why I said at the beginning of the meeting, right? So
I think,
I will...
Gavin, if you have the slides, you can share them.
Yeah, I'll present from my side.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and do that so we can just move forward here, and
yeah,
we'll all have to catch up on the slide deck later.
okay. So I've just asked to share my screen. You might need to give me permission.
Yes.
There we go. Okay, so can you see my screen? Can you see?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Thank you. So, yeah, I've got two documents that I'm bringing to the group for feedback and consideration, and I'll talk a little bit about the sort of status of them as I go. So, first one is an extension to RDAP. The idea behind this is to basically take the TTL information that the EPP extension puts inside registry systems and makes it visible through RDAP responses. But it's not dependent on the EPP extension, because you could easily imagine a registry operator that doesn't use EPP or doesn't implement this extension, but nevertheless still wants to make this information available through its RDAP implementation. So there's no tight binding between this document and the EPP document for TTL values. In terms of why you would want to do this, so the rationale really is the same rationale that behind why we publish things like NS records or DS records in RDAP. It's a useful side channel that you can use to validate what you're seeing on the wire. So if you're debugging a DNS issue and you can't see, you're seeing something that doesn't look right, you can use RDAP, or who is in the old days, to see what the registry says should be in the DNS, and if you're seeing something wrong or something different, then that helps you identify where a problem might be. And I think this is especially useful if the TTL extension for EPP becomes more used and deployed, because previously, if you're a hacker looking at something and you see, you kind of know in the back of your head, oh, VeriSign's TTL for .com NS records is always 2 days, but that's not going to be true anymore. So having a way of verifying what the TTL value should be is going to become quite important. So what does it look like? So this is an extension to domain and name server RDAP requests. It adds a TTL property to an object, and that's an array of objects. Inside those, and I can see I've messed up the JSON in this example, so I apologize for that. The events and remarks should be inside that brace, not outside. But basically, each object has an array of types. So to try and make the syntax a bit more concise there, rather than having one object per DNS record type, they're collected together into an array of DNS record types, and then a value. And to provide additional information, there's optional events and remarks properties for that object. So you can, as an RDAP server implementer, you can say, this is the TTL, this is when it was last changed, this is the policy, by using remarks and events to make that visible in the RDAP responses. In terms of the kind of life of cycle of this document, I published a 0.0 I think at the end of last year, but my focus is on the EPP extension. I want to get that done and out of the door before going any further with this. Looking forward to the next couple of IETF meetings. I think Dublin will be a good time for this to be, for me to come to the working group to request a working group adoption. So I'll be looking at doing it then. So that's the end of the discussion on my presentation on this particular document. Jim, I see you have a question.
Yeah, thanks. Question as a participant. Shouldn't these documents, the EPP provisioning of the TTL and this document for reading the TTL, it just strikes me that doing them as a pair, or at least in parallel, would seem appropriate as opposed to serial. You appear to have a particular reason for not wanting that. I'm wondering if you could say a little more. Thanks.
So the basic reason why they didn't do them at the same time is because it didn't occur to me to. So I was more focused on the EPP side of things, and then it didn't occur to me until afterwards that actually it might be useful to also make this something that you could do in RDAP. But then, as I said on one of the first slides, is that there isn't a tight coupling between these two, and an RDAP server or a registry operating an RDAP service, might not use EPP, or it might not use the EPP extension, but it might still want to make TTL information available. And so, I guess there would be a risk that someone looking at these two documents might assume that because they were published in lockstep with each other, that they somehow had some dependencies on each other, and therefore might deter them from implementing the RDAP extension when there is really no reason why they couldn't if they wanted to.
Okay, thank you. And next one in the queue is James Gould. James, go ahead.
I love the EPP draft, by the way. I've expressed in the list was kind of surprised to see this one. And the reason why was I thought the TTL would be simple enough for the client to see in DNS, and the cost associated with taking the setting data from the registry database for TTL and replicating that to RDAP is a lot of cost for what I would say little value. Can you say what the value is to users? Thank you.
So I think we kind of I'll go back to the previous slide. If you're, and I've been in this situation myself, and there'll be other people who have been in this situation, when you're debugging or trying to diagnose something, registration data service, whether it's RDAP or WHOIS, is a good way of sense checking what you're seeing on the wire. So if you're seeing a funky TTL value, and you're trying to work out, is this recursive server, doing something stupid? What should, or something transparent that's running on the wire and mess around with DNS packets or something? You want to go back to the source of truth and see, what does the registry actually say? What should be coming out of the registry? The same, so it's the same rationale that you would have for checking what name servers a domain has, or what DS records. If there's no benefit to adding TTL values into RDAP, then there's probably no benefit to adding DS records in RDAP, but we do. So
yeah, I'll just respond to that real quick, and I'll let Rick take it from there. Yeah, the inclusion of the DS is it's kind of set a bad precedence in my mind. It would be great if we said it was DNS6 signed and let the data presented in DNS be the authoritative source. But in this case, I guess they can use EPP. So EPP provides that information. Registrar can provide it to the registrar.
Not every consumer of RDAP has EPP access to a registry system. So that's true if you're a registrar, but it's not true if you're Joe Public or somewhere else.
All right, I'll let Rick ask this question.
Yeah, go ahead, Rick.
Thank you, Rick Wilhelm, PIR. So I guess I'm not sure why we would be adding this kind of DNS technical information into RDAP when we haven't previously done so. When, if you're diagnosing DNS, you typically use DIG or DNS tools as opposed to registration data tools, or DNS viz, or something else. Like, why are we using the fact that we're allowing the registrar to provision TTLs and now starting to let DNS technical information like TTLs leak into the RDBS? I think that we're crossing a threshold here with this concept that I think that we need to be taking this more seriously, that it's more than just making a parallel addition that, we're provisioning TTLs via EPP, therefore we need to expose it via RDAP. I think that we're now letting DNS technical data leak out, and I'm using that term pejoratively in order to agitate people who are likely to be agitated and whose caffeine may be running out in whatever time zone they're in, including the local one. Like, why are we doing that when we don't have other DNS data? Like, well, why don't we just add the SOA to RDAP? Like, why doesn't someone write an EPP extension to have the SOA be blitted out of and I say that with all ridiculousness, right? But or
you say that,
well, I mean, and you're laughing too, Gavin, and I say it with love, right? Because, but I know that we did that this was started because we're doing this thing, so we want to make it kind of proceed in parallel. But I think that I didn't really apprehend it until I was on the plane. But I'm wondering why we want to do this, let this thing leak out, this DNS data leak out in RDAP. And I'd like sort of the great and the good to think about that, because I think we're making a bigger step with this extension than we think we are. Thank you.
Okay, so Richard is asked you. Andy, do you want to respond to this question? Otherwise, I'll break in briefly.
You can go ahead and break in.
Okay, because I think I have an answer to your question, Rick, and that is that there's quite some data in the registration databases that is basically bootstrap data. And at some point in time, you want to see if the bootstrap data still matches your live DNS data. That is why you can look up which NS records are bootstrapped in the DNS, which DS or DNS key records are bootstrapped in the DNS, so that when there are mechanisms like the CDS or CDNS key mechanisms, you can actually compare whether the bootstrap data is still the current data that might have been updated in DNS. So that is my thought behind that. Then Andy, go ahead. Next question.
Yeah, so I want to say that I have had on occasion registrars who did not value TTL values, that they did not honor the TTL values that I gave them, and that had I been able to figure out what the registry really had, would have saved me a whole lot of grief. So, and I believe in the draft itself, Gavin's put in other mechanisms for us to understand when the TTL values have been updated, and the policy around the TTL values, because some registrars do not allow certain values to be in the TTL, and but they don't make the end user aware of that. So that's their customers. So I do believe provides value to end users.
Having trouble getting my mic back. Okay, Jim, you're next.
Yeah, so as a participant, just speaking here, while I take Rick's point, let's dig in and sort of approach it from the following place. This is not about confirming DNS in my point of view. This TTL value in particular is subject to registry policy. And registries can do what they want in terms of what they use and what they put in the DNS. Another thing that's important is this is a value which is in the registry's zone in the DNS. And so it's useful to understand what the registry thinks and have a means for doing that. Maybe this is a legacy situation. So, maybe it's time to undo all of this, but consider that NS records and DS records have been visible with WHOIS and are visible in RDAP, and you get that information back. If you don't want to have that, and from my point of view, those records are things which are in the registry zone file, regardless of what a registrar or the registrant may or may not have done or think they have done. And so it's useful to have a means to understand what the registry thinks is the state of the world. We could assume that I could query the DNS and ask the DNS for these things, and we could assume that the DNS accurately and truthfully represents what the registry thinks. But I think this is a useful extra mechanism, and I really don't see a problem with it from that point of view, even from the historical NS and DS records being there. So for me, being able to query for the TTL values makes sense, and it's aligned with that. Going and asking about the SOA, I realized that Rick was offering that up as kind of a chuckle, but there's a clear distinction in my mind because that is purely a DNS thing. It has nothing to do with the registration system, and it in no way is impacted by the registration system. So that's obviously something that I wouldn't put in RDAP, but I do think that the TTL value being there is at least consistent with what we've done historically. If for some reason we don't want to do the TTL thing, I think we should undo the NS and DS records too. That's the place that I would be coming from. Thanks.
And glue.
Yeah, and glue. Okay, next in the queue, Jim Reed. A lot of Jims in the queues.
Yeah, Jim Reed. As I said before, there are far too many Jims in this working group. I'm kind of worried about this. I can see the value from having both the registry and the child having the same DNS metadata in terms of equivalent TTLs. But I wonder if this is really a problem that really needs to be solved. I wonder if the cost is worth the benefit, or the benefit is worth the cost. It doesn't seem to me something that matters all that much. And I'll just say in passing, as some of you already know, we're mumbling about having a new DNS resource record called the DELEG record, and we might well be having a new working group, which is going to change a lot of the zone cut semantics So I think maybe that could actually even supersede what we might be wanting to achieve here. So perhaps by the time this working group has got something out the door on TTL values, is we're going to have another discussion about how to do that all for DELEG. So maybe it's better to just pause it until see what comes out of that.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Next one, Stefan.
Stefan Bortsmeyer. Just to want to make the point that there is a difference between NS records, DS records, GLUE on one side, on TTL on the other. The first three that we traditionally publish in the RDAP are very important from a security point of view. It's extremely important to be able to check that they are correct, as in the DNS, in the registry, etc. TTL does not raise the same sort of security problem. So you could say that what applied to NS, DS on GLUE may not apply to TTL.
Thank you, Stefan. I agree. Jasdeep, you're next.
Hi, Jasdeep. So yeah, I think Gavin hit on something very interesting. What is the role of directory services? Especially the line where he had diagnostics, debugging. So in RDAP, if you think about entities, which are generally organizations and points of context, why do you have it? Because you want to reach somebody, right? And it's a layman who may not know on the wire stuff, be it DNS or something else. So I think and that's why they are associated with network objects and domain objects and ASNs for now. So I think that is a good threshold for the working group to decide what we are precisely doing. Is that a good value add for this kind of semantics when we introduce to RDAP? And I'm not per se directly a DNS expert right now, but my sense of it is that this is useful. So at least that's where I'd leave it. Thanks.
Thank you, Jasdeep. Then Jim or Wes is next. Yes, go ahead, Wes. I think Jim and Stefan are out of the queue.
Yeah, there's a long queue that's old at this point. Wes Hardiker, USC ISI, and the ICANN board. Definitely not speaking for the ICANN board, but I am speaking as a DELEG BOF chair. So a lot of what you guys are talking about is not anywhere on the near-term roadmap for DELEG. So if you think this is a problem that you want to solve, quickly, I would argue go ahead and do it, and don't bet your life on whether DELEG is going to happen. I have no doubt about that. But whether it handles this sort of problem, I wouldn't hold out for it, because you may not ever get it. Or you might.
Well, you were in luck, Wes, because DELEG is the next thing on our agenda.
Yeah, so the other thing I was here to talk about is a draft that I published with my colleague and your colleague, Paul Hoffman, discussing an EPP extension to allow DELEG records to be sent into a registry. So brief summary for those who've never heard of DELEG. If you haven't heard of DELEG before, then go find the slides on the website. There's no point in me reading through all of this, especially since we had a long conversation on the last document. The rationale behind this obviously is if you want to use DELEG from in a top level domain or in a registry, you need a way of putting it there, and EPP is the way for it to get put there. So this is an extension that represents DELEG records in XML, and then describes how you can use provisioning commands to add those records to domain names. Syntax is relatively straightforward. So there are two examples on this slide. The first one is an example of a DELEG record in what's called alias mode, where none of the service parameters are being set. the idea is that if this was a deleg record in the DNS, that resolver would just resolve a service B record for config.example.net and then apply that globally to the delegation, to the domain names being delegated. The second example has service parameters. They're represented as attributes on a child element, and there's an IANA registry that's used to identify what extension elements can be. Service parameters can be used, and they're just used, just represented as XML attributes on the params element.
I'm sorry,
So
Gavin, to interrupt, but you seem to be making reference to slides and things that are there, but that's not what's being displayed. We're still on your slides, your TTL slides, your last
sorry,
one with the slide.
Right. Okay. So I'm so somehow my computer is clever enough that it's showing a specific tab on my preview rather than the actual whole thing. So let me go back. I need to reshare my screen.
Oh yeah, sorry, that's for me to do, of course. There you go.
Okay, thank you. Can you see that now?
Starting.
It hasn't arrived yet.
Okay. Still waiting.
Yeah, maybe try again, just close it out and start again.
Sure, stopping and starting again. So you'll need to give me permission. There we go. Accept. Oh, I'm very sorry. It's not working for me this time round.
James, you started the screen. Let's do it again.
Try a different way of doing it.
Seemed to go fine with the other slides.
Yeah, I don't know what's happening here. Maybe, is it worth maybe just skipping this one and moving on to the next presentation, and we can maybe, if we have time, try again at the end?
The next three presentations sort of like belong together, but I think we can skip you in there. So let's make a good suggestion. So let's go to the next presentation first. Then, Jim, can you put up the slides for Maarten for the RESTful EPP?
Yes.
And there they are. So, Maarten, go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Skip to the next slide, please. I'm here to talk about our progress with our RESTful EPP. First, a little background for those of you who are new with this subject. RESTful EPP is about mapping the current EPP commands to a RESTful API. with the goal of creating a better alignment with EPP and current API development standards. And we focus mainly on scalability, meaning being able to create scalable services, maybe running on cloud infrastructure. Performance, as in, do we need to have all the request messages and response messages currently designed for EPP? Maybe you can skip a few. Usability, EPP over TCP works great, but it can be hard to implement. And of course, usability, we would like to make EPP easier to use for developers and end users. And security, when running EPP over HTTP, it becomes easier to use a lot of standardized and already available authentication schemes for EPP. Next slide, please. So we had a first draft 12 years ago, and we created a new version of 01 based on feedback from that we got in Prague. And what we did is we created a new base XML schema based on the schema that's in RFC 5730. And we removed some of the commands that we no longer need, such as log in and log out, because we're going for a stateless API where authentication credentials are being sent for each command, and there's no longer a session being created before any of the other commands can be sent. And we also did a little bit of the renaming, because the current EPP style is more of an RPC style, where the command and then you have something like check and info, and this does not really map nicely to a RESTful API. So we changed that to instead of command we have request, and below request we added a body element. In the previous draft, we also had an EPP extension. We removed this one because it wasn't needed eventually, we found out. And we focused more on usability. So trying to make it as easy as possible for an end user API implementer to start working with EPP. Next slide, please. Oh, it's not going to the next slide. Thanks. So this is an example based on the updated XML schema that we use. The top box contains the example for current EPP. I made a mistake here because the namespace and the schema location uses the new REPP XSD naming. So that should be the normal EPP naming schema there. And the bottom box contains the new REPP example. And what you can see is that we, as I mentioned, we created a new top-level XML element called REPP to distinguish it from the regular EPP. And that instead of the command, we have a request element, and below the request element, we created a body element. And in the body element, we add the object-specific XML parts. So if we skip to the next slide, we see an even simpler example for a domain check, where we don't even need to have a request message, because for a domain check, we can just encode all the required information in the URL. For instance, here we see a domain check which uses the head method for HTTP and uses the URL to encode the required domain names like example.nl. Authentication is done using the authorization header, which allows for different token-based authentication schemes. And the client request ID is from the XML message is replaced by a HTTP request header. And some of the things that are used in the standard EPP login method, such as the namespaces that the client would like to use, well, because we don't have a login anymore, we have to use an additional request header to transmit this one as well to the server. And in the response that we see that for at least for check, we see that because check is a really basic command, it only has to return if the domain exists or not. Maybe a little additional information. Instead of having an XML message, we replace this with a couple of HTTP headers to show the result of the check request, which makes it a lot easier for a client to parse the result and continue with the processing of the command. Next slide, please. We're also thinking about adding support for JSON to the REPP, but because this is quite a complex subject, we decided to create an additional document for this, because otherwise it would become much too elaborate and way too much work. And so we currently have a document for the API itself and a document for the JSON schema. And we were at first thought about, okay, maybe just translate the XML messages to JSON messages, but then we thought, okay, maybe it would be better to translate the XML schema to JSON schema, but JSON schema isn't really standardized yet, but it is used in IETF drafts and I believe also standards. So we're not sure if this is the correct way to go, but we love to hear some feedback on that. Next slide, please. So open questions that you currently have. So we're kind of wondering, okay, what is it that we're working on? Because RFC 5730 says, okay, you can create additional transport mappings. For instance, after this presentation, we have a presentation about HTTP and Quick, which are obviously transport mappings, but this is more like an API based on HTTP. Again, it's more comparable to something like SMTP, maybe it is like application level protocol. Then other questions, okay, how do we handle the EPP extensions in the URL format? And yeah, and how do we continue on JSON support? Or do we use XML direct conversion, or do we convert the XML schema? Next slide, please. So yeah, and so for this working group, we basically have a question. So what's the way forward from here? We updated the draft significantly compared to the previous version, but we really need some input now on how to continue with this. Is this something we as a working group would like to work on? We have some collaboration from other registries already, and we plan to see if we get more support from the center community with the European registries to work on this. But there is interest, because there are multiple registries already working on RESTful APIs. And what we would like to prevent is that we end up with multiple APIs doing EPP related stuff, and that we're back at square one. So yeah, if anybody can provide us with some feedback on what the best way forward would be, then that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Maarten. And any questions? I see Scott in the queue. Scott, go ahead.
Thanks, Antoine. Scott Hollenbeck. Martin, first off, thank you for the work. I am encouraged to see that people are still interested in trying to find ways of making EPP useful, right? Yeah. But having said that, the fact that you're modifying the schema found in 5730 and kind of doing things that mean the content being moved from point A to point B is not what's defined in 5730 and successors, means that this isn't EPP. It's EPP-ish, right? So what's the path forward? I think we're not chartered to do EPP 2.0 or something that modifies the basic definition of EPP itself. So I'm kind of looking over at Mr. Murray over here for some insights into what he would think the path forward might be. I mean, maybe this is an experimental thing, right, as opposed to a proposed standard. But as of right now, I'm not sure it falls into the scope of what this working group is chartered to do.
Yeah, I get that, because it doesn't fit really neatly into the definitions described in RFC 5730 in how to create a replacement transport mechanism. And it's more than just a drop-in transport protocol. So that's what we're struggling with as well. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you. And then we have Jim in the queue. Jim, go ahead.
Thank you, Antoine. Jim Galvin for the record, speaking as a participant. I'm going to read out a question that's in the chat because I happen to like the question. I think it's really interesting. Jody Coker put a question in the chat saying, how would the fee extension be mapped to this REST implementation?
Sorry, how would the
fee extension?
Oh, I'm not familiar with the feed extension per se, but the way the current extensions work should not be a problem for the mechanism we came up with, because the current XML can just be reused without any problems. It's just we use a different root element and instead of a command we have like the request and so. But I think I haven't checked all the extensions, but I think most of the extensions can be reused without any problems.
So thank you. I guess I would suggest that probably should look at that and might want to think a little more about that. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, then thank you, Martin. Nobody else in the queue. And yeah, speaking about a different way of handling transport mechanism. I don't know which one you're going to share now, James, but we had a request to do HTTP before quick. So there you go. This is the HTTP document, and we have Mario, who is online and going to present on this. Mario, we have 10 minutes.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. This is a short presentation just to resume the discussion about mapping EPP over HTTP and hopefully move the document forward. Next slide, please. What's new in this new version compared to the previous version? The proposal has been made fully compliant with 5730 document. It aligns with the structure and makeup of APP over TCP described in 5734. And James Gould and Dan Keatley has been added as co-author in place of the guys from the Polish registry who decide to quit. Next slide, please. These are the main, the basic points or basic principle of mapping EPP over HTTP. An EPP client server connection as defined in 5730 is mapped onto an HTTP session, which is started by the client by issuing a GET request to the server. As a consequence of that, the EPP server must include the EPP greeting in the response and generate and include an HTTP session ID in set cookie response header. Afterwards, the EPP client must send all subsequent commands by issuing host requests and must include the received HTTP session ID in the cookie header to signal the server what session the command is issuing belong to. Next slide, please. Just a slide about the security consideration. servers are required to support TLS1 1.2 or higher. And we regard to the method of access control that we require to use at least one method of access control to limit the server connection access to only authorized clients. It is recommended to implement multiple access control methods, and this is a suggest provided by Scott as a feedback to the new version, that it will be incorporated in the new version 04. And I listed here in the following some of possible methods to improve access control, just to implement a kind of two-factor authentication beyond the EPP credentials. Next slide, please. As a conclusion, this proposal provides an APP transport choice which is cloud friendly. It is fully compliant with document 5730, and is fully pluggable with EPP over TCP. So I invite everyone in the working group to provide feedback on the mailing list. Next slide. As a final slide, I would also like to invite everyone to join next registry operation workshop that this year will be held in June, the first week of June. That's it from my side.
Okay, thank you, Mario. Are there any specific questions anybody has for Mario, specific on the HTTP document, not so much on the transport, because we will have another transport proposal coming next, and I think we can better do it there. But Richard has something specific on the HTTP draft.
Yes, this is a more conservative approach compared to the previous one. So it's just a switch of transport. So
this is a real minor one, Mario. In the one slide, you said something about the certificates have to be issued by a recognized authority or something like that. I think in the current stuff on that governs the TCP transport, a server is allowed to use self-signed certs, I believe. But I might be foggy on that. Is that a change from the current way that TCP stuff is done, or is this am I running out of caffeine 30 minutes after chastising others for being out of caffeine, perhaps unfortunately? And I'm happy to take that offline if that's not easily answerable off the top of your head. Thank you.
Mario, would you like to respond to that?
Sorry, but I didn't understand the question because my audio doesn't work properly. No, but anyway.
Okay, so shall I repeat the question? Rick said,
yeah.
Rick said, you know, in the TCP transport mechanism, a client is allowed to use a self-signed certificate.
Yeah. So yeah, I know that this is only one additional method that we can implement to support a kind of two-factor authentication beyond the APP credentials. So we are talking about in with regard to .IT implementation, we are talking about an implementation that has been running for 15 years this year. So we have never had threat regarding DOS attacks or something like that. So we decide to have the approach to lock the EPP client to a set of not overlapping EPP addresses, because we migrated from an implementation that was based on issuing faxes. So it required
policy, right? That's a local Italian policy.
So it's a kind of ethical decision, not technical decision. But I think that we must let the server to decide what kind of additional measure to implement to enforce the security. So
Okay.
I know
Thank
that
you, Mario. We have 1 minute left for 2 questions. Wes, go ahead.
Sure.
I'll make mine brief. This is Wes Hardiker again. If I was asked to review this as a sector review, your note in there saying you must implement or is recommended to implement additional measures, to verify the client. I think that's great. I think trying to specify using an IP address or specific things beyond that would cause a lot of questions. So I would limit it to just what you want. Maybe give some more cryptographic-based, authentication and authorization mechanisms rather than look at IP address locking and things like that.
Okay.
Thank you, Wes. Martin, make it brief.
Yeah, very brief. Thank you, Mario. In the draft, I didn't see that you mentioned anything about any URL path specifics, correct? Or is that totally open to the implementer what to choose there?
Yeah, there is only the URL of the server. So the get method is only used to start the HTTP session, and the other all the commands are issued by using the post method. So you don't have to distinguish between the specific path. Okay.
Yeah, so there's no need to maybe standardize like a starting point to start a session, or maybe like /session or whatever.
No, the session is started by using the get method on the same URL where you receive the post method. So it just the session starts when you receive the get method. Okay. In the other case, when you receive a post method, you as a client, you submit the command through the post method. So you don't have to change anything about the APP commands and the APP extensions. So and simply receive the APP commands through the post and process the APP command.
Okay.
Yeah,
Let's take this off the list because we're out of time.
Yeah, I'll check with you in the mailing list. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Mario. Let's go over to the next presentation. Transport over quick. Yang, go ahead. Don't know where you are or who is presenting this.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jiang Kangyao. I'm a course of with Warren, James, and Dan. So they are remote. I'm on site. I will a simple introduction about this draft. So maybe James and Dan have more comments later. So
okay, good. Go ahead.
So now everything is on Quick. Quick is a network protocol that's based on UTP. So now we know HTTP over QoC, DNS over QoC, media over QoC. So I think it's time to have EPP over QoC. Next. So what's benefits of QoC? So because TCP has some problems, but QoC has the new transportation protocol maybe have more benefits. For example, faster connection establishment. So maybe sometimes they have allow 0 round trip time. So maybe reduce the connection latency. So improve the performance. So they have a more new design. So have also it has enhanced the congestion control. So there's also if improve the security because they are natively support TLS. So we also have a better connection mobility. So when the environment network changes, so the QoC can easily adapt to the new environment. Next. So now we can, I think, since QoC has so many advantages, so we can have mapping EPP session measurement onto the QoC service. So we can through a combination of QoC connection and a QoC stream. So with EPP, we can request a QoC connection between two peers. One that have initiates the connection request, and the other respond to the connection request. So that means a QoC stream so one QoC stream can respond to EPP session. So since one QoC connection have many streams, so one QoC connection can have many EOQ sessions. So I think there's because TCP we can one TCP one EP session. Now QoC connection we can one QoC connection can have many EPP session. So I think these are benefits. Next slide. So there's actually we have no big changes. So there we have first we have a successful QoC connections. Then we create a QoC streams for EPP. So then send a greeting, logging, many commands and a response. So like out close QoC stream, close QoC connection. So there's no bigger difference. So but here, but we can have a QoC many streams. So we can have many EPP sessions. Next slide, thank you. So data unit format is no different for EPP. So next slide. So where is so here is some transport considerations. First, command order. We QoC guarantees the audit processing of data within each stream. So session mapping, EPP session management uses QoC streams. So these are stateful nature. So QoC supports stateful communication between endpoints. So frame data, so QoC uses frame as one of its units of information when sending data over streams. So we have also congestion avoidance, so reliability. So next slide. Next. Yes, this is a summary. So why we have a EPP over QoC? So I think this here we summarize this will enhance EPP transport security and performance because they QoC natively support TLS. So also have a better congestion control. So it is EOQ also full complied with RFC 5730, then EPP protocol. So we also for pluggable transport with EPP over TCP. So James suggests to use pluggable. So that means we can, so here is a EPP service. So we can, through configuration, we can through HTTPS, TCP, and or some other protocols. So I think this is the benefits. So please help to review the draft and provide feedback on the mailing list. Maybe James on the remote, then maybe have some more comments. Thank you.
Thanks, yeah. And we have people in the queue, so I don't. Stefan was actually first. He had a question very much at the beginning. So, Stefan, ask your question first.
Stefan Bartsmeyer. Some of the benefits of Quick do not really apply to EPP. For instance, I'm not convinced of the reason to have several streams for a registrar running in the same Quick connection. In the same way, mobility, I don't see the point, because typically the client of a registry, the registrar, does not move. So the first slide is a bit of overselling of Quick for the specific case of EPP.
Okay, so maybe because this is we did not replace the currently EPP running over TCP. So this is not replace TCP. Maybe we can provide more choices. So some registry or registrar maybe like use one of the advantage. Maybe we can give them more choices.
Thank you. And James, do you have any comments to add?
Yeah, two items. One on the performance side, the ability to be able to establish a quick connection and do the TLS handshake once, and then be able to open up multiple quick streams would be able to allow registrars or clients to be able to establish many more concurrent streams of sessions much quicker. So anyways, on the second item, there was discussion around the charter and the support for the definition of new EPP transports. And I'm going to make the case, the fact that since the transports are defined in RC 5730 as being many, and there's inclusion of transport considerations in 5730, that is an extension point. So although it's not called extension, it is an extension point that should be able to support the working group working on new EPP transports. Thank you.
Yeah. So probably that is something that we need to ask our area director, right? If he thinks it's in scope of the charter or not. I think it could. Thank you, James. Thank you, Yunjiao. There are no money. Scott is in the queue. He still has a remark to make, so let's go to Scott first.
Yeah, thank you, Antoine. Scott Hollenbeck. While we did in fact architect transport extension as part of EPP, going back to 1999, I just realized I don't know that we have a good way for transports to be discovered. So if you're a client, how do you know which transports are supported by a server? Something we need to think about.
Yes, so that's a remark about, the transport proposals in general, right? Because we now suddenly have 3 ways of trying to change the transport mechanism in EPP. So we will need to have a discussion about that too. I didn't hear anybody yet to ask for adoption by the working group, but I think it will have the same path, I think, as the extensions, the versioning and media type discussion, where we really need to think: do we need them all? Do we need only one? It's a nice thing to continue the discussion on the mailing list. So thank you, Zhao. Let's see, Gavin, do you still want to continue your presentation? Because I have your slides now.
I will. I will do so on the proviso that I will not go over the time, so I will do it in 25 seconds.
Okay.
Okay, and I was going to say, you do have 25 seconds. We're actually at the end of our time here. So
Yeah.
if you want to take 25 seconds, go ahead, but then we really do need to end.
Okay, so whilst the slides are coming up, I'll just repeat what I said before. So this is very straightforward EPP extension. It extends the domain object to allow deleg records to be added to a domain name through create and update commands, and for you to see them using info commands. One thing I would say, though, is obviously deleg is extremely early, and is likely to change dramatically before it ever sees publication as an RFC or anything approximating that. And so this this document itself is again likely to have a very long lifespan as it tracks the changes to deleg. But the rationale for publishing it now was really to kind of it was almost a political one, is to circumvent the argument that none of the cool stuff that they do on the DNS side of the IETF can ever be deployed because it takes the provisioning side so long to actually to support it. And this is a attempt to really just to say, look, we're listening, we're looking, and we're not going to let that happen this time, because look, here's a way of doing adding deleg records above a zone cut in EPP. If we can just move on to the next slide, I think. Don't expect this to become a work item for this working group for a very long time. That's all I wanted to say. But it's there, and my intention with and Paul is probably the same, is to just keep tracking the deleg work as it develops, and make sure this extension tracks it. That's it.
And deleg is still above, right? So we don't even know if a standard comes out of it. I see Murray behind the mic, but not in the queue.
I'm intentionally standing far from the mic because I don't want to talk about that.
Okay.
But I do see Jim in the queue. So, Jim.
Yeah, the other Jim, Jim Reed. Just to follow up on what you just said, Gavin, is that it's still not clear the timelines when deleg will become a working group. I think it's almost guaranteed it will happen. And I've had conflicting views over the last day or so whether or not the new working group will be up and running in time for the Vancouver meeting. I think that might be optimistic, but I think we can assume sometime, hopefully before the end of the year, that the deleg working group is up and running. When it first starts producing docs, who can say? I think Wes is now going to correct me.
No, I was going to correct you. Yeah, so Wes again, also the structure of the solution in deleg is not even in existence yet. So there is a draft that is a proposal. It is not adopted, so it's not actually the accepted solution yet, and we suspect that there may be counter proposals coming up with other ways to do it. So be careful when you track it that there's nothing to actually track yet that's solid.
I think Gavin made it clear that it's not ready for being a working group document anytime soon. I really do want to be respectful here. We're running over. David will give you the last word, and then I think, Antoine, we need to close.
I just wanted to say also to be really clear on like deleg right now is a proposed RR, but deleg is also being used as the title of this, work that might result in something that is not the deleg RR. And so we should try to avoid overloading those terms. But right now they're being overloaded that way. So to be clear, when we're talking about like this all caps deleg, it looks like we're talking about the RR, but if we're talking about the putative deleg working group, we might be talking about something very different.
Okay, thank you. And then Murray, I give you the last word.
Thank you. This is my last meeting with you as your area director. The ownership of this working group now moves to Ori, who is also coming to the mic. It's been a pleasure working with you all. I am sad, however, that you're only now starting to tackle the discovery problem and new transports, because I find that stuff really interesting. So I'll be FOMOing off in some other working group somewhere else. But thanks for the ride.
And thank you, Mary. I think it's appropriate to give Mary a little round of applause. And welcome Maury.
Hello, I'm Maury Steele. I'm going to be your new area director. I'll be asking Murray all the questions that I need to get up to speed on all of this stuff, but feel free to reach out to me or send me summaries or got my email. You know where I am on the list. Happy to chat about all of this very exciting work. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay,
Are you
Antoine, closing words?
closing the meeting, Jim, or am I?
No, you go ahead. Closing words from you.
Okay, closing words for me. Well, we're 4 minutes overdue again. So whatever time slot we take, we always seem to run out of time. Meeting adjourned. Let's see each other on the mailing list.
Thanks, everyone.